My girlfriend blocked me on everything after I tried to talk about our future. I couldn't reply, so I emailed her landlord and withdrew as the guarantor on her lease. She was left frantically calling me after receiving an eviction notice. I, 29M, thought I was building something real. 3 years together, countless nights talking about dreams and plans, weekends house hunting just for fun. She always said she wanted the same things I did. Marriage, kids, a life together. I believed every word. Last month, I finally worked up the courage to have the conversation that had been brewing in my mind for months. We were sitting on her couch after dinner, and the moment felt right. I told her I was ready to take the next step, that I wanted us to move in together officially. Maybe start looking at rings. The words felt heavy leaving my mouth, like I was placing my entire future on the table. Her face went blank. Not surprised, not happy, not even upset. Just blank. She told me she needed time to think, that this was sudden even though we'd talked about marriage dozens of times before. I said I understood and gave her space, thinking she just needed a few days to process. A week passed with barely any communication. When I tried calling, she'd give short answers or say she was busy. Text messages went unanswered for hours. I started feeling like I was chasing someone who was already gone. 2 weeks later, I decided we needed to talk properly. I showed up at her apartment with coffee from the place we always went to, hoping we could work through whatever was holding her back. She opened the door looking annoyed that I was there. I told her we couldn't keep avoiding this conversation, that I needed to know where we stood. That's when she dropped the bomb. She said she'd been thinking, and she wasn't sure she wanted the same things anymore. Maybe she never did. The way she said it was so casual, like she was commenting on the weather. I asked her what that meant for us, and she said maybe we should take a break. A break. After 3 years. I felt my chest tighten. I asked her if there was someone else, if something had changed, if I'd done something wrong. She just kept saying she needed space to figure things out. I pressed harder, asking how long this break was supposed to last, whether we were broken up or just pausing. The more questions I asked, the more distant she became. Finally, I told her this was ridiculous. Either we were together working towards something, or we weren't. I couldn't sit in limbo while she decided if I was worth her time. She looked at me like I was being unreasonable, like wanting clarity about our relationship was somehow wrong. That night, I sent her a long message laying out everything I was feeling. I told her I loved her, but couldn't handle the uncertainty. I needed to know if she saw a future with me, or if I should start moving on. I kept it honest, but not aggressive, just one person asking another where they stood. I never got a response. Instead, I woke up the next morning to find myself blocked on everything. Instagram, Facebook, her phone number, even LinkedIn. It was like I'd been erased from her digital existence overnight. 3 years reduced to blocked contact cards and error messages. I stared at my phone in disbelief. This wasn't how mature adults handled relationships. You don't just block someone you've been with for 3 years because they want to know where they stand. You talk it through, even if it's painful. You respect the time you've shared together. But apparently, that wasn't her style. The first few days were the worst. I kept reaching for my phone to text her, forgetting I couldn't. I'd see something funny and want to send it to her, then remember she'd made me a stranger. It felt like being ghosted by someone who knew everything about me. I tried reaching out through mutual friends, but she'd apparently told them we were taking space and asked them not to get involved. None of them would even pass along a simple message asking if we could talk like adults. After a week of this nonsense, something shifted in me. The hurt was still there, but anger started creeping in. Who blocks someone they supposedly loved? Who runs away from a conversation about commitment after 3 years together? What kind of person treats someone like that? That's when I remembered something that had been nagging at the back of my mind. When she'd moved into her current apartment 8 months ago, she'd had trouble qualifying for the lease on her own. Her credit wasn't terrible, but it wasn't great either, and the rent was high for her income. She'd asked if I could co-sign as a guarantor to help her secure the place. I'd done it without hesitation. We were practically living together anyway, spending most nights at her place. I figured it was just a formality, a way to help the person I loved get a nice apartment where we could build our life together. The landlord had been happy to have someone with my credit score and salary backing the lease. Now, sitting alone in my apartment while she played her blocking games, I realized I was still legally responsible for her rent. Every month for the past 8 months, I'd been the financial backup for someone who couldn't even have an adult conversation with me. The irony wasn't lost on me. She wanted space. She wanted to cut me out of her life completely? Well, she could have all the space she wanted, but she could handle her own financial responsibilities too. I dug through my files until I found the lease documents. Sure enough, there was my signature, my income verification, my promise to cover her rent if she couldn't. The lease was month to month after the initial 6-month period, and there was a standard clause allowing guarantors to withdraw with 30 days written notice to the landlord. I spent the whole weekend thinking about it. Part of me felt like I was being petty, but the larger part felt like I was finally standing up for myself. She'd made it clear I wasn't part of her life anymore. Why should I be responsible for her bills? Monday morning, I drafted a professional email to her landlord. I explained that due to a change in circumstances, I needed to withdraw as the guarantor on the lease. I cited the relevant clause in the agreement and provided the required 30 days notice. I kept it businesslike and factual, nothing personal or vindictive. The landlord responded within hours. He thanked me for the notice and explained that he'd need to notify my now ex-girlfriend immediately, as she'd have 30 days to either find a new guarantor or vacate the apartment. He mentioned that given her income alone, finding someone willing to co-sign might be challenging, but that was her responsibility now. I felt a mixture of satisfaction and guilt as I sent the email. Part of me hoped she'd reach out, that this would force the conversation she'd been avoiding. Part of me just wanted her to feel a fraction of the stress and uncertainty she'd put me through. 23 days later, my phone started ringing. I didn't recognize the number at first, but when I answered, her voice came through in a panic. She was calling from a friend's phone, talking fast, asking why I'd removed myself from her lease. I stayed calm and told her that since she'd blocked me and clearly wanted me out of her life, I figured she'd want to handle her own responsibilities too. She tried to explain that blocking me wasn't personal, that she just needed space to think. I almost laughed. Nothing personal? She'd erased me from her life like I'd never existed, and now she wanted to claim it wasn't personal? I told her that 3 years together had earned me at least a conversation, not a digital disappearing act. She said she knew she'd handled it wrong, but she'd been scared and didn't know what to say. I asked her why she was calling now, and she admitted she'd gotten an eviction notice that morning. The desperation in her voice was unmistakable. She begged me to reconsider, saying she couldn't find anyone else to co-sign and couldn't afford to move. She promised we could talk about everything if I'd just help her with this one thing. But that was the problem right there. She only wanted to talk now that she needed something from me. For a month, I hadn't been worth a simple text message. Now that her housing was at risk, suddenly I was worth calling. I told her I'd already made my decision and had given proper notice. If she'd wanted to discuss our situation, she'd had plenty of opportunities before blocking me. I wasn't going to be someone she only remembered when she needed help. She started crying, saying she'd made a mistake, that she loved me and wanted to work things out. But love isn't something you block on social media. Love doesn't run away from hard conversations. Love doesn't treat someone like a stranger for a month and then expect them to come running when you need a favor. I told her I was sorry she was in this position, but she'd made her choices and now had to live with the consequences. I hung up and blocked the number she'd called from. Update 1. That was 3 weeks ago. I thought that would be the end of it, but I was wrong. 2 days after our phone call, she showed up at my apartment. I saw her through the peephole, looking like she hadn't slept in days. She knocked for nearly 10 minutes, calling my name, saying she knew I was home. I didn't answer. She left a letter under my door. 5 pages of her handwriting, explaining everything she'd been going through. Apparently, she'd been having doubts about our relationship for months, but didn't know how to talk about them. She said she loved me, but wasn't sure she was ready for marriage and kids. The blocking was her way of creating space to figure out her feelings without hurting me more. The letter said she realized now that running away had been the worst possible choice. She wanted to unblock me and start over, have the conversations we should have had months ago. She promised to find a new place to live so there wouldn't be any financial entanglements between us while we worked on our relationship. Part of me wanted to believe her. 3 years doesn't just disappear overnight, and the person I'd fallen in love with was still in there somewhere. But another part of me kept thinking about those 4 weeks of silence, the complete erasure of my existence from her life. I didn't respond to the letter. A week later, our mutual friend contacted me. Apparently, she'd found a studio apartment she could afford on her own, but she needed help with the security deposit and first month's rent. She was asking everyone she knew, trying to piece together enough money to avoid homelessness. The friend wasn't directly asking me to help, just letting me know the situation. But the implication was clear. I was the one who'd put her in this position, and maybe I should help her out of it. I told the friend that adults face consequences for their actions. She'd chosen to handle our relationship like a child, and now she was learning what that cost. It wasn't my responsibility to fix the problems she'd created. Update 2. Last week, I found out she'd moved back in with her parents. At 26, she was sleeping in her childhood bedroom because she couldn't manage her own finances without someone else backing her up. Our mutual friends have been giving me mixed reactions. Some think I went too far, that removing myself from the lease was vindictive and cruel. Others understand why I did it, especially after hearing about the blocking situation. Her best friend cornered me at a coffee shop yesterday, telling me I was heartless for putting someone I supposedly loved in such a difficult position. I asked her where that energy had been when her friend was treating me like I didn't exist for a month. Funny how everyone wanted to talk about compassion now that there were consequences. The friend said she understood I was hurt, but that eviction was extreme. I pointed out that I didn't evict anyone. I simply stopped being financially responsible for someone who'd made it clear I wasn't part of her life. The eviction was just the natural result of her not being able to afford the apartment on her own. She called me petty and walked away. Maybe I am petty. Maybe I should have been the bigger person and kept my name on that lease until she figured things out. But I'm tired of being the only adult in relationships. I'm tired of people expecting me to absorb their poor choices without any consequences for them. Update 3. This morning, she texted me from a new number. Just 5 words. I understand why you're angry. For the first time in 2 months, I felt something other than anger when I saw her name on my screen. Not forgiveness, exactly, but maybe the beginning of it. She said she'd spent the last month in therapy, trying to understand why she'd handled everything so badly. She wasn't asking me to take her back or help her financially. She just wanted me to know that she finally understood how much she'd hurt me. The message said she knew blocking me had been cruel and immature. She'd been scared of the conversation about our future because she wasn't sure she wanted the same timeline I did, but instead of being honest about that, she'd run away. She said she was learning to communicate better, but she knew it was probably too late for us. She ended by saying she was sorry for everything, and that she hoped someday I could forgive her, even if we never spoke again. I stared at that message for an hour before responding. I told her I appreciated her honesty and was glad she was working on herself. I said forgiveness would take time, but I was open to the possibility of it. I also told her that removing myself from her lease hadn't been about revenge. It had been about self-respect. When someone cuts you out of their life completely, you can't keep being responsible for their well-being. That's not how healthy relationships work. She thanked me for explaining and said she understood. She didn't ask for anything else. We haven't talked since then, but something has shifted. The anger I'd been carrying around for 2 months has started to fade. I'm not ready to be friends, and I'm definitely not ready to date her again, but I'm no longer consumed by what happened between us. Sometimes people need to face real consequences before they can grow. She's 26 years old, living with her parents because she couldn't handle an adult conversation about commitment. Maybe this experience will teach her something about how to treat people she claims to love. As for me, I'm learning something too. I'm learning that standing up for yourself doesn't make you the bad guy, even when people try to make you feel like it does. I'm learning that love without respect isn't really love at all. And I'm learning that sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is let them face the natural consequences of their choices. I don't know what the future holds, but I know I won't settle for being someone's backup plan ever again. The next person I love will earn that love by treating me with the same respect I give them, not by needing me only when it's convenient. Maybe that makes me petty. Maybe it makes me heartless. But it also makes me someone who won't accept being treated like I don't matter. And that feels like progress.